Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a beginner's guide to Xenonauts 2. Now, originally I wasn't really planning to do a whole lot of guides for this one. I sort of figured most of this was fairly self-explanatory, but it does seem like there have been a good number of folks that were having some frustrations, so I thought I'd go ahead and slap one of these together here. Now, this is going to be one that I'm potentially going to be jumping around a bit here and there, seeing as this was originally one that I had actually already completed recording, only to then realize, you know, the classic of, hey, you forgot to turn on the mic, genius. So, you know, anyways, let's go ahead and get into this here. So there's going to be a few layers to this one, as with most XCOM likes. And the first thing that we should probably discuss here is going to be your Geoscape layer. So effectively what we're looking at here is a layer that's actually going to change partway through the game. I actually have different modes associated with this one, depending on which phase of the game you're in. So this is going to be taking place in the beginning phase. This is the Doomsday phase, as it's typically called. And this is the moment where effectively you're just trying to keep that Doomsday counter from reaching 100%. Effectively, it's similar to your Doom clock from XCOM 2. And basically, every time you fail something, this goes up dramatically. Every time you succeed, it goes down. And don't worry, they're not making progress on the Avatar project this time around. Instead, it's basically just how close the world is to ending. So setting-wise, what's going on here is that you are effectively in an elongated Cold War. What happened with Xeno 2 is that it basically retconned Xeno 1, in which the invasion didn't start when it did in the first game. In this case, they keep it going for a little while longer. They infiltrate for longer because they can't actually get all of their main invasion force through. They can only get a few units here and there, and so nobody really believes that this invasion is happening, but all of these countries are just on the brink of annihilating each other, and so you're more or less holding that line, proving that you can hold the world together until you get to the moment that the actual proper invasion starts, at which point we go to more of the classic, worrying about your funding nations kind of feel. And then at that point, all of your initial gains at the very beginning are flipped over to a new version. So, for example, if you're going and investing a lot in the early phase into stuff like operations points, you can actually end up making a lot of progress on this layer over time. So, the way that this works is that every day, depending on how many followers you have on your side and what kind, you essentially have points that you can go and spend towards getting infiltrators removed, which will stop the Doomsday Clock and or stop panic from spreading. Sometimes it'll be guys that'll help you with funding. Sometimes it'll be guys that help you with training. And so your focus on these will kind of depend on what you're going for on your particular playthrough. Like on this particular one, I just decided to go all in for stat training on units and see how big of a difference that had made. So what I'm trying to do is get the European continent bonus in order to get that additional training. So when you're going and spending your points on this overworld section, just bear in mind that if there is a green dot, that means that unit is currently relatively undefended, and that means that you can get them at a discount, whereas if there's a red dot, they're going to be fairly expensive. Additionally, removing the red tiles off the asset board there will mean that you're eliminating no infiltrator. This will be cheaper than buying a supporter. Supporters, as far as I'm aware, cannot be flipped red, but red can be killed and then flipped green. That is a very expensive process, but generally speaking, removing an infiltrator is cheaper, but it doesn't give you any long-term, proper gains, and they can potentially be flipped again if you don't flip them to your side. Whereas if you just flip somebody green, then, you don't have to worry about any of that again. So you will get additional points, points as you carry along, which, by the way, we're going to go ahead and pause this right here real quick because I do want to talk about loadouts. But you will get additional points for completing additional objectives. So, for example, let's say you're infiltrating a cleaner base or what have you, and they say, hey, you've got like 5 turns to get as many USB sticks as you can. The more of those you get, the more panic you reduce, the more information you get, the more operation points you get, that sort of thing. And so, for example, also at the very beginning, if you decide to capture the general rather than killing him, you will also start off with an additional 100. If you can complete additional objectives, try to do so in order to get those additional points, because early gains will have a tendency to snowball pretty darn well. But please bear in mind that a simple mistake here doesn't necessarily screw you forever, so, keep forward momentum going as best you can. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about loadouts. So when it comes to your weapons here, You should always try to decide your loadouts based off what you're going into. There really is no universal like thing that you always have to have with you, and everyone will have their own preferences depending on how they like to run things. So for example, in this particular case, the mission that we're looking at is one of the early game missions in which you have a rescue of 3 people that were out when your initial base was taken out. And so we know that this is going to be a situation where we're allowed to bring 5 of our own guys, and then we're going to be bringing back 3 guys with rifles. Those are going to be a higher rank, but with worse equipment when they make their way to the ship. What I'm going to be showing over the course of this video is effectively how to get them out if you have, let's say, a rescue type of mission, and then using that same mission to show how to handle a eliminate all type of mission. There are a lot of different kinds. Some of them are ambushes, which are fairly self-explanatory. You put your units in an ambush all around the map and just beat the hell out of whatever you're fighting. Usually those are super easy, even on higher difficulties. You have the ones that are on a timer. Generally speaking, most of the timed missions are going to happen early on, and you can feel relatively safe packing on heavy armor, forwarding your shields, and then just absolutely booking it to save as many abductees as possible. And when it comes to the cleaner bases, generally speaking, you want to run a couple of units with stuff like smoke grenade launchers, as well as just a lot of rifles and shotguns, and then just kind of taking whatever's convenient towards the edges of the building and running the hell out of there. As far as your mission variety goes, early on you will have a couple of cleaner base raids, you will have one proper base raid, and you will also have several abduction missions, along with one VIP extraction, which personally, when it comes to that VIP extraction, most of the time, I just go and just like chuck a bunch of grenades into that building and leave. That's one of those cases where I personally don't consider it worth the risk to the entire team to go get one guy for a few operation points. Again, you have to decide what's most fitting for your particular situation, but let's go ahead and discuss that a little bit. As far as your equipment is concerned, you've got a wide variety of basic ballistic weapons, from your pistols that are typically going to be pretty good at reaction fire. They're relatively moderate in power, very modest on range, but they are one-handed. Can be used with a shield, can be used with another weapon, basically just a solid offhand type weapon. A lot of your standard loadouts come with extra magazines for these. I would personally advise just running it with one magazine, just leaving the rest behind. It's just not worth the wait. You typically will not expend more than one magazine worth of ammunition especially for like the first few hours of the game. Later on, if you feel you need more, pack on more. But when it comes to these rookie missions, just bring the weapon as it is. When it comes to stuff like smoke grenade launchers, you'll see over the course of this video, I dedicated to one smoke grenade launcher, just continuously pumping out those grenades the entire fight, so having extra reloads helped for them, but for everybody else, just having their standard one magazine was pretty much enough to handle most situations. Again, we are kind of two-parting this particular mission, so this is more than you'll typically be doing. And from there, it's probably worth talking about the other weapon types. So shotguns are going to be your best for... while technically I want to say close range, it's more like mid to close range, seeing as if you are directly in somebody's face, there is actually a decent chance that they can miss. So if you stand a couple tiles away, that is their optimal range, they will be able to get a solid shot. Your rifles are just kind of a good general purpose. You can't think of what else you want them to do, and they'll be able to do every job decently. You've got your sniper rifles that are extremely accurate, but also very time-intensive to use. And then you've got your HMGs that are going to be a ton of firepower in just one beam in front of you, but they won't necessarily hit anything, as strange as that sounds. You might be able to hit one of those 10 shots, but for the most part, they're there to just completely lay waste to an area, put down several units back into cover, stuff like that. So, on that note, let's go ahead and talk about how the actual strategy elements work in this one, and what oftentimes will frustrate new players. So what we're looking at here is a situation where everything is very simulation-y on the gunfight side of things. You never want to be taking a fair fight if you can avoid it, which means that the standard kind of new XCOM formula of hide in cover and, take continuously better cover, take your guaranteed shots, take your flanks, and specifically just like trust your cover will keep you safe. That's not really how that works here. The two things that will keep your units safe are being out of sight and well, also being out of sight. So if you if you are looking out and you can see the other guy, they can see you. If they have not targeted you, then they may not be aware of your presence. So there is, to some degree, a sort of stealth element to this, and we'll be showing this over the course of this fight here. So, to explain our situation and to better explain what we're going to be looking at here, you always want to be scouting. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by using our 3 rescue victims over here, and they're just going to pop out, see what their situation is like. You're oftentimes better popping out, taking a look around, and popping back into cover, rather than the standard of running out and taking a shot. If you are out of sight and they cannot get sight of you, that's your safest position by far. But if you are, let's say, out in the open and you have to deal with that whole situation, your second best option is to put down smoke, which completely obscures vision and typically prevents your unit from getting hit. It doesn't mean it's impossible for them to get hit, it just means that nobody can really directly aim at them. The best that they can do is just throw a bunch of random shots into the cloud and hope they hit something. Sometimes they do, it's rare, but it does happen. So remember that while you have the option to randomly fire into an area, the enemy does too. And this is actually the thing that oftentimes gets seen as, oh no, the AI is just winning dice rolls against me. It's because you're giving them dice rolls to take. If you have a clear shot, remember that everybody on the field is a professional. They're gonna have a pretty good shot of landing something if they can see it directly. So, like right there, that guy over by the cactus in front of the lady that I guess was just sort of doing her business in the desert, there's a guy with a rifle. That rifle will probably be able to reach relatively far. We see that the pistol has maybe 1/3 of the range of that thing, maybe half actually, depending on what kind of shot we want to take with it. So he does not have the sort of firepower, he doesn't exactly have the tools to immediately engage, and we really don't want him to do that. But we know that there is a line of sight, there is a line of fire that is coming from that direction. So we take one step forward in this direction with our shield, and we see, oh shoot, we lost half of our shield health, and we additionally have a guy on the rooftop above us. So what we want to do here is make use of our heavily armored shield scout to take advantage of this situation. So he's been spotted, he is clearly within line of sight, he is clearly within line of fire. But we're going to take advantage of a few mechanics here. So first thing to be aware of is that when you hop out of your dropship, every enemy unit actually has half of their turn units available to them. They don't have their full bar. The reason that this is important here is to know that when you're running out of your dropship, your first turn is going to be your best turn for getting into position. You do not want to do the XCOM thing of sitting in place, you know, sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting until they run up in front of your door, because that's when they will wait outside of your vision range and then suddenly round the corner with a ton of firepower and absolutely obliterate you. Your first turn is your best one to hop out of your ship. Second one, and this doesn't mean that it always has to be the helicopter. When I say ship, I mean like whatever dropship you're using, because you've got a few different ones. When it comes to your turn units, what you need to be aware of is how this bar actually works. So your turn units are not just a matter of how much you can do, but they actually scale certain things that you do as well. So for example, you can think of your turn unit meter as your stamina. So effectively, the farther you are down that particular meter, the slower you move. So for example, if you are at the very end of your turn units, you are extremely likely to trigger enemy reaction fire and extremely unlikely to use your own. So let's say you have somebody sitting with a full bar and a shotgun on a doorway, they are very likely to immediately unload on the first thing that runs through that door. But if you have somebody, let's say, that spent half of their points running up to the door, and you're like, oh man, it was such bullshit that they didn't fire, it's because they were too tired and too slowed down by their run to the door to fire. So oftentimes you want to commit to a full move. Let's say you throw out some smoke, you give them a gas mask, you run them through the smoke into safety, and then take up your overwatch position. Okay? So if you're wondering why it oftentimes feels like the entrenched enemies will immediately snipe you and you're not getting those same attacks, it's because this does work a little bit differently from new XCOM, in which, yeah, if you want them to be at their full effectiveness, they have to be in a good and ready position in order to fire. Now, as you see right here, we have a couple of units out in the open, but this guy has not spotted us yet. Now, this is when you really want to be thinking about how are they going to move. I know that guy has seen our unit with the shield. They've probably got a good idea of the units in the dropship there, but they don't know about the 3 rescuees over there on the side. technically, yes, the objective said that they were on their way to go fight these guys, but he hasn't seen this guy out in the open. It's a pretty far range, and there's technically some boxes and a fence that might be able to block any shots that they take. But bear in mind that, yeah, they haven't seen them yet. So this means that that guy might potentially see this guy if he turns left to get it around that the obstacle in front of him. There's a pretty decent chance he's going to try to engage the guy with a shield and not actually look in this direction. So I'm hoping that he'll be relatively stealthy in this area right here. He's got pretty high health. I'm pretty confident in him being able to take at least one ballistic rifle shot. Typically 50 or higher is going to be enough to safely take one shot, even without armor. With armor, they will probably be able to almost certainly take one and possibly take two. It just depends on how it rolls. So that's turn units, that's line of sight, stealth, all of that sort of thing. But the next thing that you want to consider here is what you do as a backup plan. So like right here, I left this shield guy out completely exposed. He is covered from that rifle off to the right side there. But I'm going to go ahead and use the grenade rifle here loaded up with smoke rounds, which, by the way, you can load it up with different types of rounds before the mission starts in order to make sure that you're ready with those things instead of reloading partway through the fight. But as you can see here, if you try to aim through the smoke, you cannot get a clear line of sight on anything in there. You can still order somebody to fire through the smoke in a general direction by holding down control, but you still have that situation where an enemy unit cannot directly target somebody with any degree of accuracy. As always, again, this is why I personally always run heavy armor on people, because there is always a shot of a stray shot running through, but yeah, if you are on lighter difficulties, like I've personally been doing my playthroughs on veterans so far. We'll be upping that to the maximum later down the road. I just personally like the 10% survival chance. I don't know. It feels like it makes for a more interesting story to me. Obviously, pick what difficulty works for you. This isn't a contest. We're not trying to do the Pain Olympics over here. So, if it's too difficult, if you want your units to be surviving, the game is balanced around you losing like a unit or two per fight, so just, bear in mind that as long as you're completing objectives, getting new things to research, that is what you're here for. Generally speaking, your funding nations will give you a decent amount of income once the actual war starts going, and until then, you just want to keep winning missions in order to be able to keep your support going. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to triple smoke in order to completely cover everybody up. What we're looking at here, and what we have to pay attention to, is our angles, okay? So, what we see in terms of our angles is that the rifle guy over there on the right, he is completely blocked off from seeing anybody. He has no effective shots. He's at long range. He's no longer a threat for all intents and purposes. On the left, we have an unknown number of units, one of which might potentially spot our guys that are looking at us here. Also, we have one of the locals that just decided to go all gung-ho on what is effectively the FBI, but anyways, that's a whole, story thing in this one. But we see that while these guys have advantage and positioning on us, we do have a lot of smoke, and I knew that the shield over there would probably be enough to take at least one more rifle shot. Typically, you can take a couple of rifle shots on a shield. Later on, once they start carrying around laser weapons and stuff like that, you'll probably only be able to take one on the basic ballistic shield, but still, it's enough to at least get somebody into a better position. So, essentially what we're doing is using that guy as a decoy. We're using him as a way for them to get overconfident, to stop paying attention to the units in the helicopter, and then essentially use this to buy time for the three rescue units over there on the right to move their way back over to the dropship. We're going to use the SMG the HMG over there to attempt to start putting some holes in this building, as well as maybe putting some holes in those hazmat suits. Personally, I kind of hope at some point that they'll add some sort of mechanic that if a cleaner agent is injured, that they suddenly, are affected by smoke. I know they're still wearing the mask. It's just like, I don't know, it just feels like one of those things that should happen. Anyway, so right now we have our shield guy, whose shield is barely holding together. He's currently going to be hiding behind the corner around some smoke. Standing in the smoke doesn't really obscure him very much, but essentially what we're trying to do is just cause them to waste all of their shots. Causing the AI to waste their actions is going to be pretty effective, and hiding in smoke and taking random shots at a building is oftentimes going to be a decent way to buy time while you're sitting and waiting. And if you're thinking like, well, shouldn't I just sit here taking my, leaving my units to take Overwatch shots? Yeah, that's technically an option. I personally prefer to leave like 1 or 2 units with rifles or shotguns. Later on, this will be the pistol and the rifle, just kind of in case they decide to charge in. But generally speaking, if they see that there's multiple units in an area, they usually won't try to completely charge into that spot. Anyway, though, as you can see, we're currently still quietly making our way around the map with these units right over here, and this will continue for the foreseeable future. I'm actually going to go ahead and skip ahead a couple of minutes because this continues for a few more rounds here. So they will continue on until they eventually reposition a bit closer to the ship, just kind of continuing to hide in cover at far away, skirting around the edge of the map, not trying to do anything particularly fancy. Now, this particular approach works in situations where you have to rescue somebody, but you're not on a timer. If you are on a timer, there's going to be several missions where, let's say you're rescuing somebody and you specifically have to hurry. What you really want to do is have a couple of smoke grenade launchers and just effectively make a tunnel for them to go through, just run straight through the smoke. This does cause them to potentially take a lot of stun damage over time, since most of your rescuees will not actually be coming in. With gas masks or anything. But remember that, let's say, like, if you're rescuing these rifle guys over here, all of them will have medkits. Medkits can remove stun damage, and so this means that you can actually use that stun mechanic to your advantage. Sometimes, let's say you end up knocking out the person that you're rescuing and just carrying them back to the dropship. Other times you can just run them straight through smoke. Other times you can keep a couple of rifles nearby them with medkits and just kind of keep letting them breathe using those medkits. It's a potentially very useful mechanic. I personally find it a very cozy way to deal with any kind of rescue mission type situations, and especially if you're looking to try to get into a particular building that has a lot of stuff in it, the smoke bubble is very, very effective. Remember that at any point you can always just give somebody a gas mask and they can just breathe through the stuff just fine. You just kind of want to tailor that to whatever seems most effective to your team at the time. Now, I want to talk about a few other mechanics that you're currently seeing on screen right now. One of them is going to be what I call the point blank mechanic. I don't know what the official term for it is. And the next term is going to the next thing is going to be how injuries work in this one. And potentially how you can win a lot of your fights without trying as hard. So when it comes to the injury system, basically, if you see that red puddle on the ground over there, if there's a red puddle underneath a unit that's been hit, that means that they are currently bleeding, which means that they are taking damage over time. In essence, if you've hit something 1 or 2 times and you can just keep them pinned, there's a pretty solid chance that unit's just going to bleed out. If you can remove their threat, they potentially are no longer an issue. Now, I'm playing without health numbers unlocked, or rather without showing health numbers. If you are playing on the standard difficulty, you will be able to see how much HP they have left, and if they have something like 20 or less and they are bleeding and you are able to suppress them, just do that. Honestly, it's not worth the risk going in to finish them off if they're just going to bleed out in a couple of turns. Unless you're in a hurry, just kind of leave them as is. And this is especially true in cases where they're actively bleeding out, they're blocking something important, and potentially blocking another unit from going to those important places. So they potentially could be a more of a problem for the enemy side there as they're bleeding out, rather than being a problem for you. But again, this is all subject to you using stuff like smoke and suppression to keep them pinned. Okay, because again, remember that when the AI is calculating things, it's also kind of trying to make a plan of sorts in its head, so it may potentially be counting on somebody that's about to bleed out for an important turn, so they potentially leave a flank exposed or something like that. So let's go ahead and talk about armor mechanics real quick. So when it comes to armor, every unit, to some degree, will have some degree of armor on there. Now, by default, your standard guys will have their Kevlar armor that they can just pop on for free, but you will be able to get better armor suits as time goes on that'll give you more of an armor rating. Now, the way that this works is that when a unit is going and taking damage, it's essentially going to be rolling a damage number based off of the weapon. That damage number then is essentially having the armor value shaved off, and then it'll attempt to do whatever's left to, whatever's left. Now, the thing about this is that armor is not a static thing. So you'll notice later on when you're fighting mechanical enemies, and this is actually one of the reasons I really appreciate that they gave you the little robot drones early on this time, because when they take some damage, you'll oftentimes notice like, oh shoot, that shot completely plinked off. It's time to fucking run. No, in those particular cases, it's actually best not to panic, but just to keep on shooting. See, their robots work the same way as your robots. Their heavy armor works the same way as your heavy armor. Namely, if the damage rolls low enough, it'll essentially be absorbed by the armor, but that armor rating goes down with every hit that it takes. It breaks apart. So armor breaking essentially translates to the fact that something like a basic ballistic shotgun is still very effective at shredding off even heavy armor. And so every time that something's hit, more of its armor goes away, meaning that if you just keep on shooting at it, eventually everything dies. This is actually why the original Xenonauts, basically the heavy machine gun was by far the best weapon. It's gotten very heavily nerfed accuracy-wise in this one because, in the very first one, you literally would just, stand half a map away and just annihilate with just a bajillion HMG rounds. So, this time around, the HMG is definitely more of a suppression weapon, as it should have been. But just so you know, that is how armor is going to work. And so the next thing from there is going to be the point-blank mechanic. So the point-blank mechanic is... Again, that's probably not the official term, but basically it means that if something is immediately close by to you, you can actually aim around it. So like as you see on the left there, I've got a rifle guy hiding behind the shield guy. Sure, his shield is only going to shave off maybe a couple of points of damage still, but it is a way for him to basically have mobile cover. If you have one unit crouching down and the unit behind them standing, they can actually aim over their head. And if you have one unit crouched behind another, there's a chance for friendly fire, but they're generally speaking going to have a really high chance to just kind of aim over their buddy's shoulder and take a shot. So just so you're aware, that is a mechanic that's there. So if you're at point-blank range, whether it's cover or whether it's another unit, you typically can aim around it. Unless it's very tall, unless it's very chunky, you are able to take a shot around it. Now, the reason that this is important is the sort of misconception of, if you know the classic scene from Naked Gun of like two guys shooting from behind a trash can and neither one can hit another. That's not quite the case here. So if you have one guy run up and attempt to recreate the Matrix, presumably shouting out a dodge this and completely whiffing your Beretta shot, that is going to happen more often than you think, and it's mostly because they don't have any guarantee to hit at absolutely point-blank range. If you are at about 2 tiles away, you'll have a very clean shot, and oftentimes will have a better shot than if you are standing directly right next to them. And so this is largely due to the way that scattering works. Now, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me or anything, but basically, if you are directly right there, it's just, rolling for that chance to hit. If it scatters anywhere, that is several tiles around that unit where that shot can potentially scatter. If, let's say, you take a shot from farther away and it scatters, all of those tiles behind that unit where the shot may scatter to are still effective for hitting them. So this means that if you give yourself a little bit of range, even point-blank weapons are still going to be more effective at hitting somebody. Additionally, if you are going for a capture, it is worth noting that hitting somebody with a flashbang first will make those melee hits more than likely to actually go and hit something. So let's say if you were wondering what the point was of something like a knife or the club or something like that, if you flashbang a room and then you run up and go hit something with your classic knockout stick, you're gonna do pretty good. Now I want to take a quick second, whatever, to go address this situation right here. So we ended up getting caught by surprise by this guy. All right. So this is one of those situations where you do want to potentially start firing. We have smoke covering all of the rest of the area with relative safety, but I didn't notice this guy hiding in the corner. I thought they had repositioned to the center of the building, and so he got a shot off on one of the guys I was trying to rescue. They were completely out of smoke, and they couldn't make it into smoke without still being within rifle range of that guy. So there was really no effective way for them to get into a hiding position that didn't also give him the high ground in some way. However, he was out completely in the open, and they both had rifles. This meant that they both had pretty solid odds of hitting him, and additionally, there potentially was more firepower from the helicopter that could potentially be deployed if they somehow missed several 80% shots. So this is what I mean when I say that you really don't want to be taking dice rolls that often, unless you've got several dice rolls. Okay, the thing about dice rolls is, again, you can always just get more dice. You don't necessarily just have to rely on that one and cry that, you know, you didn't win at blackjack because you decided to go bet on one thing. It's why oftentimes you'll have the classic thing of hedging your bets. If you have to take a chance, take several chances and your odds are better. So, like right there where, again, he essentially couldn't take any decent shots from the left where he would have had cover, so he had to expose himself, which meant that now our odds were a lot better because we had several shots on him from reasonable cover with exception to one guy, and effectively had backup plans on backup plans to deal with that situation. So, the benefit of all of this, which we'll get to for the second part of this mission here, technically our objective is just to rescue these three, and I was treating the first half of this mission as if that was the main objective here. Technically, it's an eliminate all map, but I wanted to show how this still could be useful for those situations as well, where we're using this time to get everybody into one place, so we're not at a firepower disadvantage, and additionally, we're using this to sort of scout out what the other guy is doing. You always want to be scouting in this game as much as you possibly can. Oftentimes, as I said before, it's better to pop out, figure out what your situation is, and then hop back into cover rather than taking a low-chance shot. Does that mean that sometimes, you know, you really want to just take some free shots? Sure, but please bear in mind that you are exposing yourself in those situations. The other guy not knowing what you're doing is a pretty important thing as well. Now, a couple of other mechanics, just to go ahead and dip over here. Let's go ahead and take a second to talk about how the different weapons actually function, since you will have consistent versions of these weapons throughout the game. And additionally, it's worth noting to treasure your ballistic weapons because they are basically, well, completely free. So this means that even when you do get some you know, technical upgrades in the form of going and getting magnetic rifles from the cleaners and stuff like that, when you go make your own, or let's say you happen to eventually get your lasers and other types of guns as well, the thing to remember is that your free stuff can still kill stuff just as well. Okay, it is, you know, it's free, it's unlimited, which does give it a, you know, a pretty cozy value all its own. Again, remember that the beating insanity mode on the first Xenonauts basically was an example of just running forward with shotguns to scout things, and then just attempt to pepper down with shotguns, and then you just have a bunch of HMGs in the background just scattering a ridiculous amount of bullets at something until it goes away. Every problem can be solved by shooting it enough. Your enemies will get additional abilities as time goes on, but learning all of these basic mechanics will help you deal with everything. So, yeah, when it comes to shooting stuff, again, if it's taking your hits, just keep on firing. The exceptions to this are going to be when aliens have abilities specifically for countering stuff like this, but that doesn't mean you can't get around it. Let's take, for example, what Wraiths and Sectons end up doing partway through the game to address your bullshit, since your superpower is more DACA. So, for example, something like the Secton, if they survive a shot from you, they can actually start manipulating the mind of the shooter to attempt to try to worm their way into their mind to control them, or to just fuck with their accuracy in the meantime. So this is why the follow-up shots on those guys are oftentimes harder to hit. Or let's say something like the Wraiths, who have what is effectively adaptive camouflage, and if, let's say, you get the jump on them, you take a shot on them, it triggers their camouflage, which means follow-up attacks are harder to hit. But in both of these cases, you simply scout them out, you figure out where they are, you have a sniper take that shot with much higher accuracy, leave them in a bleeding state, and then suppress them with a flashbang. Okay, fantastic. So now, instead of being this active threat that could easily take on multiple of your units at once, now you've potentially used a couple of them as a team to go and keep this thing from being a problem. Potentially it might be already dealt with depending on how high that initial hit was. So something like a sniper rifle is good for those good, single, high-accuracy initial hits. For your protracted gunfights and flexibility, you're going to want your rifles. So these are going to be... They're going to be okay at suppressing things. They can take several shots. Depending on who's using them, they can potentially take up to 6 shots per round. Each of those shots is going to be enough to potentially one-tap any of the cleaner units, and potentially 2-shot some of the mid-game stuff. Some of the heavier game stuff gets a bit kind of up there, and I haven't seen everything in there, but that's just kind of a good starting point to go off from. But again, those rifles will still hold up decently well. But those are best for flexibility. Shotguns are specifically for reaction fire and DPS. You don't want to necessarily treat them as the instant win button that they are in a lot of games like this, so they're not going to have guaranteed accuracy. They're going to have good accuracy, but that doesn't mean that they're going to hit everything. And for anyone that gets upset by this, I would like to invite you to go play Resident Evil 2 Remake. That seems kind of random, but it's so much easier to understand the shooting mechanics of this game after playing something like that. Now, basically what I'm trying to say is, if they open a door and they're immediately bum rushed and thrown to the ground, it's gonna be a hard time getting a shot. If they run up to something and it's, it's just a few feet away from them, sure, but if, they're trying to just snapshot the thing in the second before it hits them, yeah, they're probably gonna be missing some shots there. Remember that everything has a decent shot to hit, but it's not guaranteed. And remember that stuff like smoke or fire or whatever else is always going to be playing a part, and in many cases, you can completely weaponize that to your advantage. Like, let's say in this situation right here, you have things like timed explosives, bigger explosives, and whatever else. There's nothing stopping you from, let's say, putting smoke along the entire building, giving your units gas masks, completely covering the floor in various plastic explosives, then retreating back to your ship. As they pull in, you basically just pull a Fallout New Vegas and just immediately demolish the entire area and essentially leave anybody that's left completely exposed and, out of cover. Most are suppressed, most are completely turned into mist, the rest are potentially just, left in a bit of a bad position. There's a lot of things like this to consider. You don't have to take a straight-up fight, and you basically should try to never take a fair fight if you can potentially avoid it. Now, as far as other weapons are concerned, you also have stuff like the SMG, which kind of gives you the best of both the pistol and the rifle to some degree. It's not going to be as accurate, but it's capable of burst fire, capable of being in one hand. They do show up in more limited numbers. They're not going to have the heavy hitting power of something like the rifle, and potentially don't even have the DPS of something like the pistol. But either way, they are a good little flexible thing in some situations. Which then circles us back to the old shield, knife, and pistol. So what is the purpose of these things? So the pistol is, again, just there for lightweight flexibility. It doesn't weigh very much. You can pretty much off most human-sized units with a pistol with reasonable efficiency there. It's got a very low cost for its individual shots. And so this means it's very good for popping out of cover, taking a quick random shot, and popping back in with relative safety. Remember that you are scaling your speed, basically, with your remaining turn units. So, when you go and face somebody, if you pop around a corner with a pistol, take a shot, and pop back, your odds of hitting reaction fire coming back at you is a lot lower than it is, let's say, with somebody doing the same with a rifle. This is why you'll notice with rifles, most of the time they're getting into position, either having multiple rifles stacked up to take a shot at the same time, or in cover, whereas we're going to be using the pistol guy to maneuver around a little bit. So that's what their purpose is. Now, what about the combat knife and the baton? So the baton is obviously for captures, but again, if you throw out a flashbang, you run up with a couple of batons, you're usually able to subdue the thing in relative peace. Additionally, when it comes to stuff like the baton there, since you are ideally suppressing something before attacking them, this oftentimes means that if you can corner a unit, like let's say that previous issue with a secton mentally affecting somebody that was shooting at them, you can always just run up and whack them in the back of the head, and then whack them in the back of the head again, and that problem is just dealt with. So it gives you a sort of infinite ammo way of dealing with stuff at close range. And sometimes close range is just the situation that you're in. They're not necessarily going to be a super reactive weapon, but they're definitely something that's good for pinning something down. Again, if you run out of ammo, if you have the means to overpower something with numbers, it can be a very effective tool. Additionally, the knife. Now, the knife is not going to be, obviously, there really aren't a whole lot of weapon tier lists or anything for this one. It's not exactly going to be popping up on anyone's, perfect weapon tier list or anything like that, but they do have an interesting thing in which that, unlike the baton, like obviously in most cases you probably want to go for a capture because you may get some research as opposed to anything else, but you do have a very high chance to bleed. I forget if it's guaranteed or if it's just a really high chance, but this effectively means that it could, in theory, be a one-tap weapon in some tricky situations. Like, let's say you sneak up on a guy, you flashbang, you can run up, shank him with a knife, run out, barricade the door, and potentially problem solved. It might potentially be a way of dealing with a problem without taking a lot of high-risk gunfights, without wasting precious ammo in certain situations. It could be exactly the tool that you need in some circumstances. It's not going to be perfect, and you damn well better bet at some point I'm going to do a knife-only run of this game. But yeah. All right, now, we saw something just happen here that I want to call attention to. You'll notice the unit that just got shot. There was a alleyway that opened up between the smoke that a cleaner was able to get a shot off. Now, this wasn't unexpected, it isn't ideal, but it is something that can happen. This is one of those reasons that you want to keep pumping down smoke whenever it happens. But you'll notice something else, and this is actually part of the reason that I actually don't run gas masks on a lot of units unless they specifically are going to stay in the gas long enough to actually cause a problem, in which it's actually potentially a way to avoid bleeding wounds. So what we see here is that my shield guy, he actually ended up taking a few shots, but due to the fact that the first shot knocked him below his knockout threshold due to the stun damage that he took, effectively if the yellow bar beats the red bar at any point, they just simply fall unconscious, he is now in a position that he just decided to take a nap instead of die. So, in some cases, it might be a way to keep somebody from potentially dying in unfortunate manners. I'm not going to say that's super reliable, but it is something that's come in handy a few times. Alright, now, using the old smoke thing and also trying to pull them out of cover and also deleting their cover from before, we were able to deal with that guy using several decently accurate rifle shots. Again, sometimes you want to take more or less, but due to the fact that he couldn't get any shots anywhere else, he did decide to go and expose himself, which allowed that to happen. Now, once again, I missed a guy on the flank here. These things will happen, but we'll go ahead and hide this one in cover for the time being. And what I was calculating here is what the odds are of him surviving in different situations. So if we put him behind the building, this essentially meant that he would be in cover for this second, but that guy could just simply run around and get a flank on him immediately as the next turn starts. So what I did was I ran him into that cloud of smoke over there. Now, the odds aren't perfect, but I know the cleaner unit has a wall blocking him from one side, and additionally would have to run around some cover. So he's going to be lower on turn units, he's going to be taking a lower accuracy shot. If he wants to take a good shot, he's taking cover under those cinder blocks over there on the right, and he's still going to have to fire through a lot of smoke. If he decides to completely circle around for a flank on the left, he's going to have almost no points to fire, which means that that shot's at least somewhat survivable. From those units on the currently left side of the map here, he is at least partially covered by what's left of that brick wall, and then on the right side, we've mostly dealt with most of the threats there. So now with that guy suppressed, and additionally, having accounted for how he would potentially move, we're kind of hiding in relative safety over there in the smoke. Now, he will get knocked unconscious later, but for the moment, that was one of those cases of a weird way to potentially put somebody into a sort of non-standard kind of cover. Another thing to pay attention to when it comes to angles is that your cover is very angle-based. So like right here, we still get a 50-50 shot on this guy through some smoke and, around that barrier there because we're able to shoot directly through those barriers. We have only one tile of smoke actually blocking our accuracy there. Otherwise, the odds would go up to like 70-ish%. Against that guy that's technically behind a wall because half of him is sticking out from behind that wall. Remember that it's very simulation-y in that way, so even though, under XCOM rules, they would be pressed against the wall and peeking out and everything else, under this game's rule set here, as you can see, they would be sticking out. Now here, he went out, he took a shot through that smoke, he got lucky and ended up putting that guy on the ground, which again, will end up happening sometimes. They will get lucky, but best you can do is improve your odds and keep improving the way that you handle things. So what we see here is that, yeah, the odds were low, but they were not zero. But now we've got several of them moving and pushing up. They're all formed up in a way to try and block the way. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at our rifle shots. Going to see that they kind of iffy, but that guy is going to get suppressed because he's had a few shots going at him. And then we're going to use the HMG to go and attempt to suppress the other guy and, well, suppress him out of existence. So, at this point, we've got one pinned, we've got one hiding behind a wall, one that is vaporized, one that is currently hiding, and we've still got the building mostly surrounded here. But you'll also notice that we're actually starting to run into ammo issues, which we'll address over time here. So I went ahead and moved that guy behind the building, because I do want to see if we can get some sight on this guy inside, just to see what he's up to. So next thing I want to mention as far as mental state goes. So you'll notice sometimes they're very easy to suppress, other times they're very not easy to suppress. So when it comes to mental state, effectively the more somebody is getting shot at, the easier they are to suppress. That's that blue meter down there on the bottom right. And so effectively when you lose units or when you're getting shot at, your meter goes down, and that makes you easier to suppress and potentially makes you vulnerable to panic. The units that you're fighting are either, mind-controlled or basically drones, so they do not panic. That's one of those sort of like horror elements of this game, that your own units can panic, like looking at what the hell they're facing, and then these guys, they're basically just dead inside, so you're effectively fighting mindless husks. And so there are some exceptions, like I think the cleaner agents can panic because they're technically still just dudes, but I don't remember. Doesn't really matter. It's one enemy type, and they're very easy to deal with anyway, but still. So, what this means is that the better that you're doing, the better that you're fighting, the more stable of a position you're fighting from, the better the sort of mental faculties of your people. If you take 3 back-to-back losses trying to push through a building, there's a decent chance that all the people that are left are just going to panic and run as soon as anything goes even further wrong from there. Whereas if, let's say you're in a position that you're maybe not necessarily making as much ground, but they're not hitting you, you're taking out their units, you're keeping your own units safe, their morale will actually stay reasonably high and potentially may result in a situation where otherwise cowardly units will not run. Now, they do get better as they gain more experience, but keeping everybody stable, keeping everybody safe, that's how you keep morale up. You will occasionally get somebody that is an absolute chicken shit rookie, and, in those situations, they're the ones that you don't really give any important jobs to. But remember that anybody can potentially have issues. Anybody can randomly just have a real bad turn of luck where they go to scout around a corner and it's like, hey, here's 3 guys with shotguns. So just remember that you never want to put all your eggs in one basket. Whenever it comes to trying to fight one guy, you generally never want to let yourself get outnumbered. If you are outnumbered, stop fighting and immediately let everybody hide, okay? You got to break line of sight, you got to put smoke out there, you got to keep them running away, try to get the other guy exposed before you really take too many shots with them, and only in situations like this, where you can keep them suppressed, you can keep smoke going. Like, I was already completely out of smoke on account of doing a lot more than I needed to with this one. Trying to show 2 missions in one video. So effectively I have people running out of ammo, running out of smoke, but this is a situation where we still have enough of a good position here to keep forcing them to expose themselves, put themselves into rough positions, that sort of thing. Okay. So with that all being said, also remember not to fire over your own guys when they're at a distance, because there's a chance of friendly fire. And remember that every object along the way is not simply reducing your accuracy, but it's got a chance to hit that object. So this means that if, let's say, you hold down control and you aim beyond something, you can oftentimes drill through cover to hit something. Additionally, there's a lot of things that they cover in the tutorial that people immediately forget about, so just to throw this out here, many things will have additional tooltips to remind you of how their mechanics work. If you mouse over anything that has white text, you've got nested toolboxes to help you out with that. Let's say you have these situations where you're unclear on whether or not you'd be able to take a decent shot from somewhere. If you hold down Shift, you can essentially pick a tile that you want to get an estimate for, and essentially what their accuracy would be taking a shot from that tile. So that gives you the ability to sort of make more accurate decisions when it comes to whether or not it's worth taking that risky flank. Additionally, if you right-click on anything, it will save the points for it, just like Classic XCOM did. Well, I guess a better version of what Classic XCOM did in that regard. So there's that. And additionally, until you're more comfortable with avoiding line of sight, until you're more comfortable with throwing smoke absolutely everywhere, remember that heavy armor is going to resist a huge amount of things for your first few months. Like, almost nothing can one-tap you in heavy armor, and like this is the second highest difficulty right now. They are still able to take shots pretty regularly. Unless they take a full, like, burst fire from a rifle right to their face, they're going to be able to survive it. Burst fire almost always misses at least one of its shots because its accuracy is dramatically lower. Again, its purpose is primarily spray and pray, so, you know, you may hit one shot, but the rest of it is just there to lay down suppression. So if you want accuracy, take your accuracy shots. Second thing, don't get frustrated when you see an enemy unit popping out, taking a shot, and popping back in. If that hurts you, you're doing something wrong, because most of the time it's going to be a rifle or pistol that's doing that, meaning their accuracy is going to be like 20 to 30% in a lot of cases. Like, you're usually going to be outside of their optimal range, they're just taking a random pot shot, and that means that you should not be in that situation to begin with. When it comes to scouting, try to play this like Minesweeper, okay? Pop out one tile around a corner, peek around, see if you see anything. Hop back in. Do that a couple turns if you can spare the time to do so. If you can't spare the time to do so, if you are on a timer, remember that you always can just run and surround things, because in most of the missions with timers, you will be outnumbering them until they get backup. So, let's say you're on a cleaner raid to go collect their data. You usually can throw out a ton of smoke. Just run through the smoke with gas masks, collect what you need to collect. Don't directly fight too many things. Like, suppress things, shotgun them if you're very close, but you're only there to do a smash and grab. If you're doing an abduction mission, again, stun things, deal with collecting all the tubes, then deal with the fact that you probably came in with twice as many units as they did. Usually they're hiding off in corners and usually will not be fighting you very much. Remember that when it comes to smoke, you can actually target enemy units as well and cause them to essentially knock themselves unconscious. If they are holed up inside of a building, throw a smoke grenade in there. You'll potentially run into a situation where they cannot run outside because you'll get a shot off on them. They also can't stay inside because they are taking 10 stun damage every time that they're sitting and waiting in it, and an additional 2 to 4 every time they run through a tile of it. This means that if you can keep them pinned down and suffocating for a couple turns, you've essentially beaten them without ever fighting them. Okay, so with that being said, that's basically everything that I wanted to cover here, especially considering that the video restarted. And my attempts to make this a shorter video resulted in making it even longer. I'm bad at this some days. Anyways, hopefully some of these tips were useful for you. Hope this helps you be a bit more successful in this game. And yeah, I personally prefer to play on an Iron Man rule set because it just gets you used to taking those losses and adapting to them. I guess the last thing to mention here is remember when it comes to your operations points, they're not all just spent on gaining supporters. You do still have the option for going and doing things like refreshing your pool if you happen to lose too many units or something along those lines. Generally speaking, those are more of your later game options, but just know that if stuff's going really poorly, you can always spend some points to avert Doomsday for a little longer, because getting through that first phase is not going to be too long of an endurance race. As soon as you can clean up the base, you can definitely get ahead of all of that, and it tends to give you a lot more points to play around with, so it's kind of a last little note on that. So, y'all have yourselves a good one. Thank you for stopping by, and if you have any questions, please, by all means, feel free to reach out, leave a comment, all that sort of thing. Oh yeah, my friend said to mentioned the word hype at some point. I guess apparently if you press the button, the channel sucks less. It's worth a try, I guess. If the button appears, maybe do that if this helped you, I guess. I just kind of do these for fun, so you do you. Anyways, have yourselves a good one. Take care. See you in the next one. Bye.